there are two quarterbacks in the 2020 draft class that have yet to win a playoff game. Joe Burrow has won one. Jordan Love has won one. Jalen Hurts has won one.
It's won more than one.
But so far,
I knew you didn't want to say that, but
so far, Justin Herbert had his chance, blew a lead at halftime, 27-0, if I'm not mistaken. And Tua had his chance. He didn't play in his first playoff game. Skylar Thompson played in it. And then the second time around, he was in KC and he didn't play well either. Which one of these two quarterbacks do you think will win a playoff game first?
I love that.
Before we start, did you? I want to say Zach Wilson, Justin Fields, Trey Lance. They all in the same draft, right? We all flopped that year.
No, they're all. Mac Jones was in that class.
Yeah, like I was a Justin Fields fan. You were Trey Lance. You were Zach. They all suck now, and I find that just so funny. The answer is the Dolphins, and I know. I'm not the biggest Tua fan. I'm also not the biggest Justin Herbert fan. So this is me not being biased. This is me giving my objectivity here. But I just think Miami's a better team right now. And I think, with the way it's played, I think Miami has a chance where they could maybe host a playoff game. And if not host a playoff game, they'll be in the playoffs. And, when you're in the playoffs in the NFL, you just prepare for one game, one night. Anything can happen. I think for the Chargers, unfortunately, they did go into that playoff game against the Jags. They were up big in the first half. Second half came out. And, even watching Justin Herbert, he didn't look like the top 5 quarterback that you wanted to see from him. He didn't have a good game, and Tua also had a shitty game against the Chiefs. But I think with Miami, I trust the infrastructure more at the moment. You got Mike McDaniels, you got Tyree, you got Waddle. I think the offense is preparing to have another breakout, statistical, elite year. I think the defense will be solid. And I think for the Chargers just right now, I think their defense, if they're healthy, it's going to be really good. Offensively, though, I really struggle with looking at the lack of talent they have, and I really struggle. When I get the quarterback discrepancy, I will always pick Justin Herbert over Tua. But I think at the same time, when you have Tua, Tyreek, and Jalen Waddle, it looks a lot different than when Justin Herbert has Ladd and all these other guys. So I think for me, I think Miami would win it before the Chargers. Now, if the Chargers end up 2 off seasons and they bring back an elite team, then I could look stupid for this. But I think Miami right now, I just trust them a little bit more.
Unless your thought process is that neither team wins a playoff game this season, and then next season Chargers have another off season where they can revamp, get another wide receiver, and then now we're talking about next year's playoffs, then you can make your argument. But if we're going solely off this year, the Dolphins have the better offense, they have the better defense. That's what it comes down to. I guess you could look at head coach, and I would still take Harbaugh off over McDaniels, and that's a respect to McDaniel, who is a pretty good head coach in his own right. But Jim Harbaugh has come into the league, has shown that he can be dominant, go back to go coach college, be dominant in his own right, so much so that he had a job immediately when he wanted to come back to the National Football League. So I look at both of these teams, and it's really simple to me. If we're talking about this season, Dolphins have the better team on both sides. When it comes to offense, even though Justin Herbert is better than Tua at the quarterback position, the offense as a whole, it's the Miami Dolphins pretty easily. The offensive line, I probably would lean with the Chargers because they do have Rashawn Slater and now Joe Alt. But the offensive line for Miami, I'll never love it. I understand Armstead, when he's on the field, it is a drastic difference with Miami's offense. But again, it's a certain unreliability that I see with Tehran that I can't trust him fully. You lose Robert Hunt, of course. This offensive line is definitely going to struggle, but with the offense that we've seen in Miami, it's going to be quick. It's going to be fast. They're going to get the ball out. They're going to run the ball pretty efficiently. Also, Raheem Mostert and now Devon Achane. This is a high-powered offense mixed with the fact on the opposite side, at the secondary, you add Kendall Fuller, you add Jordan Poyer, mix that with Jalen Ramsey and Javon Holland. You bring in Jordan Brooks at the linebacker position. You bring in Anthony Long. You bring in, of course, Chop Robinson, who's been pretty good in this preseason, and he was a super raw talent, but he's been showing flashes early on. Jalen Phillips is ready to go. Bradley Chubb will most likely start the season on the PUP, which means he's ineligible for the first 4 weeks. But when he comes back, now we're talking about a surefire defense, an all-around defense. That's obviously what would intrigue me more as opposed to the Chargers, where I can't trust that Joey Bosa is going to stay on the field. I don't know what version of Derwin James I'm going to get. Khalil Mack, another year older, was pretty good last season, but how's he going to look now again? Like I just mentioned, another year to his career. I don't love this Chargers team as a whole. I trust Jim Harbaugh. He deserves that. I trust Justin Herbert. Maybe he doesn't deserve that, but the talent that he has, it's obvious. Just go turn on the film. But when it comes to comparing the two, it's obvious the Dolphins are the better team.
I wonder which way you go to spice things up a little bit. I think both teams going into this season, ceiling to me is like a wild card type team. I don't think either team's going to win the division. For the Chargers going through Kansas City, I mean, that would be the biggest surprise of this whole season. If the Chargers somehow come out, win the division, Kansas City doesn't win it for the first time in the Mahomes era, I would be appalled. The Dolphins, of course, have an easier path because the Jets and the Bills, I just don't think are as good as the Kansas City Chiefs. We all have them consensus number one in our power rankings. But I just look at that last 6 weeks Miami schedule that we've gone through so many times, and it doesn't get harder than that. They're playing the best teams in the NFL the last month and a half of the season. And what we've seen from Miami the last couple of years is the same thing happens. They're going to start off on fire. They'll probably start off like 8-1 again, be one of the top offenses. Tua's going to be in MVP talks. But once we get to that final 6 games, they're going to have a really big lead because it's likely they go 1-5, 2-4 at best under that stretch. And 3-3 would be best case scenario. So we're talking about both of these teams, the Chargers and the Dolphins, likely being wild card teams. That means if you're the 5, 6, 7, you're going into the number 2 ranked team in the AFC, whether that's Baltimore, whether that's Kansas City. If the Jets are able to stay healthy, I think all of these teams are better than the Chargers and the Dolphins.
You think Miami going into Houston, though, is crazy?
No, that's doable for sure.
It's in a dome.
That's the one team I look at in terms of division leaders, favorites right now, that if they went into Houston, that's a 50-50 game. That could go either way. But going to, again, those cold weather environments on the road in January is going to be really tough for both teams, I think. So I would have both of these teams probably not winning a playoff game this year. And to Drew's point, the argument you would make, going into next season, with what the Chargers are building, I could see that happening. Miami right now, they just need to show it to me. They just need to show to be able to win those big games down the stretch of the season, be able to lock up the division, be able to win a playoff game. Of course, the Chargers haven't been able to get that done either, but I think it's a little bit different when you hire a new coach, someone as successful as Jim Harbaugh has been throughout his career, whether you look at the NFL or at the college level. I think the culture and the team they're building there over the next 2 or 3 seasons is going to have more success than Miami will.
I feel like this is just between taking something that's known and something that can be an unknown. The public and our perception of these two teams is very much that the Dolphins are better. When you look at Vegas and FanDuel and their lines, the win totals, Miami's line is at 9.5. The Chargers line is at 8.5. So they're projecting the Dolphins to be a better team, but by 1 win. And that's just a credit to Jim Harbaugh and respecting him because he's been able to turn around programs before. With the Dolphins, part of me questions if this is the year that things are just going to go right for them. Because you look at the beginning of their schedule, and much like the New York Jets, it's a very easy schedule. If they start off 8-3, which is very possible given how their schedule looks like right now, is this the year that they turn the tide and they start beating these teams or at least splitting them? Because the problem is not that they're losing to an elite team. The problem is that they're always losing to an elite team or a great team. But if they can find a way to split, or instead of going 1-6, you go 2-4, I think now we're talking about a team that maybe can get a home playoff game. I struggle with believing in the Dolphins just because they're a team built for the regular season. They are elite at running outside of their tackles, but their interior offensive line is not very good. And in the playoffs, when defenses scheme up for that, they leave that area susceptible and they're not able to run up the middle. They add another linebacker to the middle of the field and you're not able to throw those middle routes that Tua loves, and you force them to throw outside the numbers. I do see a scenario where the Chargers make the playoffs and they face a team like, let's say, a Cincinnati if they happen to win the AFC North. And that's a terrible run defense. And you're like, okay, with this play style, they do match up well with this team. And then there's an upset alert brewing with that because I think the Chargers will be built much more to be a sustainable team and to actually have success against weaker run defenses in the AFC. I'm going to go with the Chargers because I feel like in the AFC, a ton of top teams in the AFC are terrible run defenses. And I think what the Chargers are building with this rushing offense, I think it would be one of the better ones in the league. If J.K. Dobbins stays healthy, I mean, we are really seeing something special because he's an explosive player. And Justin Herbert, I think, is in that tier with the Allens where he is a one-man offense. And they do need to make a move at the deadline, though, because I don't envision myself picking for the Chargers in the playoffs if Josh Palmer, McConkey, and all these guys are still on the team. They need to get a trade for somebody, even if it's somebody like a Jacoby Myers, somebody in that type of tier to at least make this passing attack somewhat respectable.
So you don't think the Dolphins' rushing attack will be better than the Chargers?
This year?
Yeah.
No, the Dolphins, I think, will be better.
So they'll have a better rushing attack, passing attack, probably a healthier defense, and you're still going with the Chargers.
I think the Dolphins, the way they're going to get their efficiency is on outside runs.
Of course.
And they're able to do that because their running backs are so fast and their tackles play better like that in space. But in the playoffs,
dog shit in between?
Their offense is dog shit when running in between tackles. And I think their offense is very schemable in these playoff environments. And I do trust the Chargers defense. I think that's the unit I'm highest on with their team. Even if Joey Bosa is hurt, obviously I wouldn't want him to miss the entirety of the season.
That's a tough one, man.
But they had a joint practice with the Rams, and they shut down the Rams offense. And that was with Puka, and that was with Cooper Kupp.
Let me ask you a question, because it is preseason. The Broncos shut down the Packers in joint practice. Am I supposed to be here and just be concerned about the Packers offense because the Broncos, who we're all projecting to be one of the worst teams in the league, went and shut down one of the most prolific pass offenses in the league? It's not fair to do that.
I'd be excited about the Broncos defense, and I think the Broncos defense is going to be
So you
good.
think the Packers offense is overrated?
No, I don't. I just think the Broncos have a good defense.
We got good personnel.
Yeah.
We got good personnel.
And I think with the Chargers, their defensive line, their duo, their edge rushers are going to be one of the best in the league.
They just have to play.
That if they're
healthy, agreed.
They are a better defensive line than the Miami Dolphins.
Disagree.
Khalil Mack is not the same, though.
I think they both
Yes,
have
he
the
is.
same questions.
Khalil Mack is still an elite edge rusher.
You have 4 edge rushers that all get banged up.
That's true.
Yeah.
I just think when you watch that Buffalo and that Chiefs game, and it keeps just rapping in my brain. That was a team that saw bad run defense, ran the ball a shit ton, and just because they couldn't get nothing consistent in the pass game, especially late in the fourth quarter, they couldn't win that game. And I look at the Chargers, and they may have that ability to run on other teams, but it's gonna be a moment where you're gonna have to make a play in the passing
And that's
department.
when you have Justin Herbert. Well, you just said Josh Allen, to be fair.
you
That's
do.
a good
And
point.
I agree.
Yeah.
Justin Herbert, Josh Allen,
Two dogs.
Yeah, but it's like Josh Allen had Stephon Diggs, and he still couldn't. The Chargers don't have anybody on Khalil Shakir's level, at this point. So it's like
Respect Josh Palmer.
No, that's not even they're just saying they don't have anybody. So it's like you're just relying a lot on the defense being healthy, which they haven't shown us. Unfortunate, because they have a lot of great players on that defensive side. Then you're relying on the run game to be consistent, which in terms of also hoping J.K. Dobbins will be healthy for the first time in his NFL career.
I am hopeful that he is healthy.
And then the receivers
who
I like receivers to being rookies or inexperienced to come out and just be amazing. That's a lot of ifs. I don't know.
I'm only expecting one player to stay healthy on defense. That's Joey Bosa. That's the only
Derwin
guy that
James
needs to stay healthy. Derwin James has been somewhat healthy, and
He
last
has to get
year,
back to that form.
him and Alohi Gilman they were one of the better safety duos in the NFL, and I think Asante Samuel Jr. is really good.
Yeah.
I am also counting on Christian Fulton having a little bit of a bounce back. He's been having a tremendous camp, and he's looked really good in his playing time in preseason, and I think he's somebody that going into his 3rd season in the NFL, I was very high on for him to break out. And then he fell off a cliff with Tennessee. And there's a reason why the Chargers signed him. They took a flyer on a guy that was a highly touted prospect who was very talented. And I do trust Jim Harbaugh to get the most of this. And like I said when I begun, this is like taking something that's unknown versus something that has shown itself already. The Dolphins over the past, I can say 4 years now, dating back to Brian Flores and his first year with Tua, every year they have had a chance to make the playoffs, and they fumbled twice with Flores, and then with Mike McDaniel.
They
Tua
made it
got
twice,
hurt
though.
in year 3, so I'm not going to put that much on him because we don't know what they could have been if they went into Buffalo because Skylar Thompson kept them at least within fighting distance.
Yeah, that Miami
but
defense showed out.
You know, they just tend to collapse at the worst time, and their record by month gets worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, no, I get that.
And that to me shows a team that's not built for the playoffs.
The Chargers haven't shown you though in the last 3 or 4 years that they can get to the playoffs. They've done it once.
They've had the worst coaching in the NFL.
That terrible coaching.
Yeah,
I think what we're
that
saying
is
is both
very
teams.
true.
It's matchup dependent. If
super
Miami
selective.
goes up and
Yes.
they get
You peeped though,
they
right?
get Houston round 1, that's a great matchup. If they can't Kansas City round 1, that's terrible. Same thing for the Chargers. If either of these teams get one of the weaker AFC teams, like they have a chance to beat Cincinnati. They have a chance to beat Houston. Now, granted, we don't know what those teams are going to look like at the end of the year. Like fucking Cincinnati fucks around and has like a top 5 rush defense somehow, then things change. But it's just both of these teams can't go in and beat juggernauts, in my opinion. Like they're not matchup proof by any means. So if they get a favorable matchup, if Miami gets a dome game, for example, if the Chargers get a game against a susceptible run defense, then anything's possible. But I think we all kind of see these teams as like fringe playoff teams. You get the right matchup, you can win a playoff game.
So will any of these teams win a playoff game this year?
I don't think so.
If I'm putting my money on anyone,
I don't even have the Chargers making the playoffs.
My Tribal Chief.
That's the first step. I think Miami makes the playoffs.
it's okay, at least in my opinion and estimation, to trust that the Chargers will be back next year. Year one,
This is a better
immediately,
question for next year.
Harbaugh just comes in. I get it. He's a superstar head coach. He's unbelievably great. I get that, but it's unfair expectation for him for us to go and look at him and think you have to make this team a playoff team in your first year because of who you are.
The Niners went from what, 4 to 11,
Yeah,
13?
yeah, that's kind of what happened.
Like no
6 to
troll.
13?
This is
Yeah.
like,
But the
crazy.
roster's not the Niners
It's
when
not,
he
yeah.
took over.
I mean,
It was nobody thought the Niners
We
roster
also
was the
didn't have
Niners
Justin
roster.
Herbert on the Niners roster.